Shen Yue attacked by a masked intruder. Miles Wei's reaction nearly shut down the entire production. The production lights inside Studio 9 were dimmer than usual that night, casting long shadows across the set of their upcoming C-drama. The air was unusually heavy, a quiet tension crawling across the walls like a warning no one could hear. After the hospital scare with Miles Wei and the brief disappearance of Shen Yue, the entire crew thought the worst had passed. They were wrong. It started with a scream. Not the theatrical kind the director asked for. Not the exaggerated, melodramatic type the cameras were waiting to capture. This was raw, sharp, terrifying enough to slice through the noise of generators and construction tools. The kind of scream that made every single person on set freeze. Shen Yue had been inside her makeup room alone, preparing for a night shoot. The assistant makeup artist had stepped out to get a different shade of foundation, leaving her for what should have been no more than 30 seconds. 30 seconds was all it took. The scream came again, louder, more desperate. Something crashed violently against a wall. A table overturned. A mirror shattered. And then a voice, low, distorted, unrecognizable, shouted something no one could fully hear, but every syllable sounded like a threat. Crew members ran toward the room, but the door had been locked from the inside. Fists pounded against it, panicked voices yelling her name. No answer, just a muffled struggle and another crash. Then silence. A suffocating, horrifying silence. That was when someone yelled, "Where's Miles? Where did he go?" The moment the entire studio shook, Miles Wei had been rehearsing lines on the opposite side of the set, still exhausted from the hospital incident days earlier. His manager had insisted he take a break. Rest. Recover. He hadn't listened. Not when it came to Shen Yue. The moment the scream cut through the building, he dropped his script. Something inside him snapped. Instinct. Fear. Something beyond logic. And he sprinted toward the source, without waiting for explanations. By the time he reached the hallway, people tried to block him. "Miles, wait. Someone's inside with her. You can't go in, he's dangerous. Security is on the way." But Miles didn't hear a single word. His eyes were already wild. His breath sharp. Sweat dampened his hair despite the cold. He slammed his shoulder into the locked door once. It didn't budge. Twice. The hinges groaned. A third time, and the frame cracked open. What he saw inside would haunt him. Inside the room, the makeup room was turned upside down. Chairs overturned. Backdrops torn from the walls. Makeup scattered across the floor. A trail of shattered glass leading toward the far corner. Shen Yue was on the floor, her back pressed against the vanity counter, one hand covering a fresh bruise on her arm. Her breathing was fast, shallow, panicked. Standing above her was a masked intruder. Not a burglar. Not a fan. Not a stranger who'd somehow slipped past security. This person moved like someone who had been watching them, learning their schedule, knowing exactly when she'd be alone. He held a sharp metal object, its reflection catching the dim studio lights. Not a knife, but sharp enough to terrify her. When the door burst open, the intruder spun around. Miles didn't hesitate. He lunged forward with a shout that didn't sound like his own. It was primal, protective, a reaction born from hours, days, weeks of watching Shen Yue being pushed into danger again and again. The intruder panicked and swung the object wildly. Miles ducked, grabbed the man's wrist, twisted, and pinned him against the wall with a force no one had expected from someone who had collapsed days earlier. Security stormed in seconds later, dragging the intruder away while he kicked and screamed. A piece of the mask fell off, revealing only part of the face, jawline, cheekbone. Nothing identifiable, but enough to spark speculation among the crew. But Miles didn't care who the intruder was. He dropped to his knees beside Shen Yue. "The collapse that didn't happen, you. Look at me. Look at me." His hands trembled as he held her shoulders. She tried to speak, but her throat tightened. Tears streamed silently, leaving clean trails on her powdered skin. She clutched his sleeve like she was afraid he would disappear too. "You're safe," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You're safe now. I'm here." Crew members watched from the doorway, stunned. Some exchanged looks. Others whispered. A few recorded without realizing they were doing it, hands shaking so badly they barely noticed. Shen Yue leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his chest. He held her as if his life depended on it. His fingers tangled in her hair. His breath trembled against the top of her head. Her hands clung to him, desperate and shaking. One of the stagehands muttered, "This isn't acting. This is real." Another replied, "They've been hiding something. They have to be." And still, Miles didn't let go. The explosion of anger after Shen Yue had calmed enough to breathe properly, the director barged into the room. Pale, furious, shocked. What in the world happened here? How did someone get in? Who was he? How did he know she was alone? Why wasn't security present? The room fell silent. Miles looked up slowly. His eyes had changed. The softness he used on Shen Yue was gone. In its place was a rage that electrified the air. "If you had protected her the way you were supposed to," Miles said coldly, "this wouldn't have happened." The director stiffened. "Miles, listen, no, Miles, cut in. I nearly lost her. Twice. In less than 48 hours. His voice rose. "And you're telling me you don't know how a masked intruder walked straight into your production studio?" The director opened his mouth, then closed it again. Miles stood. "If you don't fix your security," he said, every syllable sharp as steel, "I walk. And I'll make sure everyone knows why." Gasps echoed across the room. Shen Yue grabbed his hand, trying to calm him, but his anger had already detonated. That single sentence nearly shut down the entire production. Later, when the cameras were gone, they sat together in the darkened corner of the studio, away from the chaos, wrapped in a silence that felt both fragile and heavy. She leaned against the wall, exhausted. He sat beside her, knees drawn up, elbows resting on them. "You," he said finally, voice softer now. "Did he hurt you anywhere else?" She shook her head, though her body trembled at the memory. "You shouldn't have come running," she whispered. "What if he had attacked you too?" He turned to her, eyes steady. "He could have hurt anyone," Miles said. "But he went after you. Not me. Not the director. Not a staff member." His jaw tightened. "And I can't stand the thought of that happening again." Her breath hitched. "Miles." He looked away, staring into the distance. "This isn't a coincidence," he muttered. "The rooftop. The hospital. The broken dressing room door last week. And now this." Shen Yue swallowed hard. "So, you think someone's targeting me?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was enough. A whisper the camera didn't catch. She turned toward him, her voice barely audible. "Miles, thank you. If you hadn't come in, I don't know what would have." He lifted a hand, placing a trembling finger against her lips to quiet her. "Don't finish that sentence," he whispered. His voice cracked again. "You don't know what it did to me. Hearing you scream. Knowing I was on the other side of a locked door. Knowing you were in danger, and I wasn't fast enough." He took a shaky breath. "You can hate me. You can avoid me. You can pretend none of this matters. But don't expect me to stay calm when something happens to you." Her heart stumbled. She looked at him, really looked at him. The exhaustion in his eyes. The fear he tried to hide. The panic still trembling through his hands. "Miles," she whispered. He didn't move. So she reached out and held his hand instead. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. But the silence between them said everything. Danger had pushed them into the open. Fear had stripped away the careful distance. The studio, the scripts, the cameras, none of it mattered anymore. All that remained was the truth they were both too afraid to admit. But now, after the mask, the struggle, the terror, there was no going back. Their story had changed forever. And the world would soon see it. If you want, I can continue with the police questioning the identity of the intruder, the security footage leak, Miles confronting someone from the production team the moment Shen Yue finally realizes who the intruder was. The mask drops again. The studio hadn't recovered from the shock. Even after the intruder was dragged out, even after Shen Yue was checked by medics, even after Miles had been forced to sit down to calm his shaking hands, the fear lingered like a stain on the air. The makeup room was sealed off, but its broken door and scattered shards of glass felt like an open wound exposed to everyone passing by. Crew members walked quietly, whispering theories, none daring to speak above a frightened murmur. Shen Yue, wrapped in a gray blanket, sat on a metal case near the back exit. Her knees were pulled close to her chest. She was trying to breathe normally, but each inhale was tight, shallow, like the oxygen refused to enter. Miles watched her from a few feet away, visibly torn between wanting to scoop her into his arms and giving her space to recover. His fists remained clenched so tightly that his knuckles looked carved from stone. The lights flickered overhead, and she flinched. Miles moved instantly. "Hey," he said gently, placing his hand on her shoulder. "I'm right here." Her breathing eased for a second. Only a second. Because just then, a stagehand hurried toward them with something clasped in his hand. Something small. Something black. "Miles. Shen Yue, you need to see this." Miles stepped forward first, shielding her slightly with his body. "What is it?" he asked sharply. The stagehand swallowed. This was on the floor near where the intruder stood. He handed it over. A piece of the intruder's mask. Only now, under better lighting, they could finally see it clearly. It wasn't a cheap costume mask. It wasn't plastic. It was reinforced, thick, custom-designed, something made for someone trying not to be recognized by very expensive cameras. Shen Yue's breath shook. Why would someone prepare something like that just to attack me? Miles felt the chill run down his spine. He turned the mask piece over, and a small metallic chip fell out. "What's that?" the stagehand asked, eyes widening. Miles crouched, picked it up, and held it close to the light. It was a recording device. One that had been turned on. Shen Yue's hands flew to her mouth. "He was recording me?" Miles froze. Not recording. Streaming. The device wasn't saving the footage. It had been transmitting somewhere else, live. His blood ran cold. "Someone was watching," he whispered. Shen Yue felt the world tilt beneath her. "Watching me struggle? Watching me scream? They didn't only want to scare you," Miles replied through clenched teeth. "They wanted to capture it." The crew member stumbled back in fear. "Miles, we should show the police." But before he finished, the bright overhead lamp flickered again. And this time, the flicker wasn't a malfunction. It was deliberate. Someone had tampered with the power grid of Studio 9. Shen Yue stood up, gripping the blanket tightly. "Miles, this feels planned." He didn't deny it. He stepped closer, holding her by the elbows. His voice was low, steady, but trembling with rage. "They're not done." Whoever that was, he wasn't working alone. The second shockwave, just as they were about to alert security control, a loud clang erupted from the makeup corridor. Everyone snapped toward the sound. Miles immediately positioned himself in front of Shen Yue again. A metal light stand had fallen. No, had been pushed from the upper platform. The heavy steel pole lay on the ground, rolling slightly. It had barely missed landing on the assistant director, who scrambled backward with a scream. "What the hell?" he yelled. "There's no one up there." But they all knew that wasn't true. Someone was still inside the studio. Someone who knew the layout. Someone who understood exactly where to strike. Someone who wanted to cause chaos, not with noise, but with fear. Security rushed again, fanning out across the catwalks. Their footsteps echoed above the group, but nothing, no breathing, no movement, could be heard. Yet the danger wasn't gone. Miles turned to Shen Yue. "We're leaving. Now." She blinked in shock. But the director? To hell with him. "You're not safe here." He grabbed her hand, not thinking, just acting. His grip was firm but trembling. She didn't pull away. They moved through the studio, weaving past terrified crew members, stepping around toppled equipment, pushing through the confusion. As they neared the back exit, Shen Yue suddenly stopped. "Miles." He turned. Her eyes were fixed on the wall beside them. Someone had drawn something on it. Letters. Huge, smeared letters. Written with black paint. Or maybe not paint. 2 words. "Not done." Shen Yue felt a wave of dizziness hit her. Miles stepped closer, inspecting the writing. His jaw tightened so much the muscles twitched. "You," he whispered, This is a message." "No," she replied, voice cracking. "This is a warning." "And it was written while we were still inside that room," Miles added. Meaning, the intruder had an accomplice. One who didn't escape with him. One who was still somewhere nearby. Shen Yue's legs buckled. Miles caught her before she hit the ground. Her fingers clutched his shirt. "Miles, why is this happening? Why me? Why now?" He held her close, his breath warm against her hair. "I don't know," he said. "But I promise you this. No one touches you again. Not while I'm alive." The hidden lens as they headed toward the exit, security officers ran past them, but Miles forced them to stay out of Shen Yue's way. She was pale now, quieter than she had been earlier, like the shock was sinking deeper into her bones. They reached the hallway outside the main studio, and just as Miles pushed the door open, he noticed something glinting in the ceiling vent above them. A camera lens. Tiny. Hidden. Perfectly positioned to watch the entire hallway. Miles' blood turned to ice. "Security," he barked, pointing upward. "Get that down. Now." The officers scrambled onto a ladder and pried the vent open. Inside wasn't just a camera. 3 cameras. 2 audio transmitters. A wireless booster. A small device blinking red, still transmitting. Shen Yue staggered backward. Miles grabbed her waist, preventing her fall. "Someone installed all this before tonight," he said, voice low and shaking with fury. "This didn't start today. They've been watching us." Shen Yue's lips trembled. "Why? What do they want?" He looked into her eyes. And for the first time, Miles had no answer. But he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't an isolated attack. It was phase 1. And they had just barely survived it.